there are those that would accuse us of having lost our enthusiasm in our worship time. Like when Gary leads singing because he smiles. There is definitely enthusiasm there. It is good to have all the Tosti family with us, all of them. I don't know if this is coincidence or not, but Lee wasn't speaking either for Bible class or for the sermon. And they're all here. What do you know about that? What I have to present this morning is fairly simple, and in fact it's incredibly simple. I have one point to make, and it might be even briefly by the standards that I have set for myself. We'll see. It was one of those where I almost thought, you know what, I could stand up, I could make the point, I could read a verse, I could sit back down. I'm going to do a little bit more than that, lest you feel gypped or too enthusiastic yourself about me being up here at this point. I wouldn't want to do that to you. I want to talk about fleeing sin, and the reason I want to talk about it is because I have, I'll just say the word felt, for lack of a better one at the moment, that perhaps we could use a reminder of how important this is. There was a time a number of years ago, and not very many years ago, where it was popular to categorize thoughts, or before Pinterest and Notepad on your phone, 3x5 cards were kind of something that a lot of people use to keep track of ideas or that kind of thing. And we still use those, and we still use lists. And so I have arranged this presentation in terms of lists and 3x5 cards. The verses will be popping up on cards, and the point, which I will be hammering numerous ways, it's all application, and I will be repeating the point many times, specifically by point, will be kind of showing up as lists. Look, how do we apply this? How do we apply this? How do we apply this? That'll be going by as a list, and then the verses will be popping up and going away again, and that's kind of how I wanted to present this, because the idea for me here is to not do something terribly complex, which I have tried and failed at numerous times, but to just make the point and hope it sticks and move on. Mental floss, lists and recipe cards for practical application. There's nothing you haven't heard already. I apologize, it's so small. Hopefully everything will be bigger in a moment. I keep on forgetting that my computer shrinks things down. I don't know why it does that. So let's look at this. Temptation, sin, and guilt. I want to spend a little time looking about how we use these words for the sake of clarity as we go on. Temptation, a course of action that attracts someone, a desire to do something, especially something wrong or unwise. I mean, that really is difficult to see. I am sorry.
Can you turn off the front lower light?
Yeah. I can do that. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, the verses will be up there. So, disaster mocks the calamity of the innocent. Calamity is the Hebrew word for temptation here. I wanted to illustrate how it's kind of used flexibly between the Old and New Testament. We see the root of the word appear in sort of ways that we're not used to seeing it. So, the Hebrew disaster mocks the, in other places it's translated, temptation of the innocent. That's from Job. The Greek word there, I'm not going to bother pronouncing as one of them. The lawyers came to test Jesus. That wouldn't surprise us here that the word temptation will be used. This is from Matthew 16. Saul came to Jerusalem and was tempting to join the disciples. Attempting, was trying is that word. Examine. This was an interesting one for me. Tempt yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Okay. Spend some time looking at this and deciding where you're at from 2 Corinthians 13. Again, that word, the root there, is the Greek temptation. We will not escape temptation. Luke 17, temptations to sin are sure to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. Technically, we won't even avoid sin. Can you avoid sin? The answer to that is sort of no, in the sense that it is around us everywhere. We have to be cognizant of it. We have to be cautious of its existence. We have to, wise as serpents, gentle as doves. So what we're talking about when we talk about avoiding temptation is really avoiding the guilt of sin by keeping temptation to a minimum. Okay, sin doesn't separate you from God, because there is sin and you don't have to be separated. It's the guilt that you incur by sinning that gets you there. We all understand what we mean when we say sin separates you from God, but that's really what we're saying. Consider temptation from 1 Corinthians 10. I wanted to look at this briefly as a jumping off point. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. So some encouraging points about this. Temptation that is common to man. You have the sympathy, if you are tempted, of everyone on earth. Everyone has been tempted. Nobody understands me because I'm being nobody, I have not even heard anybody say that, so perhaps this is a sort of a silly point to make. God did not single you out, though, in this sense. Okay, he's not coming down harder on you. Even if he were the one tempting you, it's not like you're suffering something that he has allowed you that people haven't suffered one way or the other. It says God is faithful, which means you have God's sympathy too. Hebrews 2:18, for because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. So, man understands our plight. God understands our plight. Doesn't get much better than that. Just when it comes to our ability to help each other. Hebrews 4:15, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. I got to work on this. But one who is in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. If you fall, then who is at fault? James 1:13 says, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, for he himself has tempted no one. If you are facing temptation, God has faced it, man has faced it. God did not fall into sin, and there are men out there who have faced specific temptations we have seen and have not sinned in that situation. And if some of those temptations are common, you can look and understand that if you fall, it's your own fault. It is your own fault. To continue on with this verse, it says, beyond your ability. And I just kind of wonder, is this a benefit of being a Christian? We see verses that talk about men being turned over to Satan. Paul talks about that. We're familiar with addictions. People get to the point where they have deceived themselves with their own sin. And I just kind of wonder if when you are a Christian and being a faithful Christian, if this is specifically talking about you. In other words, are people who have sinned and sinned and sinned over and over again and do not have a relationship with God at all. Is it possible, and I'm not looking for an answer, but let's just think about this for a second and then move on. Is it possible that a person who has been sinning willfully for many, many years and doesn't even care anymore, could they be tempted beyond their ability? Okay, there's something in front of them that they should not have, but it is outside of their control at this point to say no to that thing. Is that not what addiction can be? I just want to suggest that. I didn't conclude anything from that, but I do wonder. Notice that it doesn't say you won't be tempted beyond your ability. It doesn't say that. Ephesians 2 even says the opposite of this. For by grace you've been saved through faith, and it is not of your own doing, it is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. So if you were tempted, you won't be tempted beyond your ability. This is what we sometimes say, and we actually mean something else. Because if we meant what this says, we're saying, well, I have the capacity to cope with this on my own. And that's specifically not the point. The point is you will be tempted beyond your ability, but God's ability will help get you through this. That is what it takes to be there. So God is there to help you. Will you be tempted beyond your ability without God's help? I think that's what that's saying. Otherwise, we can. Who needs God to get through temptation at all? And then it mentions escape, and this is where I'm going to spend the rest of the time, essentially. Escape. What does this mean? Why would he use this word? Avoid the guilt, avoid the sin, avoid the temptation wherever you can. Prepare yourself to suffer anything if that is how God helps you escape. How does he help us escape? What are we escaping? Death, imprisonment, here's my list. Pain, illness, war, injury, litigation, hunger, shipwreck, internet starvation. Do we have to get rid of our internet? Insurance premiums, high density urbana, low density countryside, nasty weather, verbal abuse, awkward social situations. What are we going to suffer so as to avoid temptation wherever we can? There's an interesting thing to consider here. The temptation is the desire. The encouragement is to avoid the temptation. Okay? So, can you desire something that is wrong and not sin? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. But the Bible seems to be emphasizing the fact that the best way to avoid the sin is to do all you can to avoid the desire first. Okay, extra step back. So let's consider that for a minute. Joseph. Marcus hit some points that I weeded out of mine from last week because I was going to spend some time here. To review the story very briefly, Genesis 39. After a time, Joseph's master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her. But one day, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. Now, just before I forget it, that list I had, awkward social situations, running out of a house naked is about as awkward as it gets. Okay, so Did God provide a way of escape for Joseph? He didn't sin, did he? He got out. And if he were to say, well, there wasn't a way of escape, not that he had explicitly 2 Corinthians in front of him, but the idea being, if he was able, well, I did everything I could, but it was unavoidable. No, there was a way out, and it was very, very awkward, but he did it. A resisted temptation he could not avoid day after day. That is something that Marcus had mentioned. I mean, he was a slave. He could not leave. He could not leave. But he showed strength against that. But look what happened. When there was no other way out, gave up everything and fled. No other option. He fled. The word fled. Hang on to that. So what do we think, again, constitutes a way of escape? I'm making this point the second time in 2 minutes. Personal inconvenience? Okay, I'm faced with a temptation. Am I willing to flee that temptation if it means something laboriously difficult? I'm going to have to physically remove myself from that situation that takes work. I'm on one floor of a building. I'm going to have to go up 2 floors to a Bible study or something. I'll have to take the stairs. I don't know. How do you? Okay, that's a good example. You're getting on an elevator and you see somebody who's got a filthy mouth. Okay, can you get off and take the stairs instead? I mean, that'd be a personal inconvenience. But the point is that if you're tempted to sin, avoid that temptation wherever you possibly can. Financial discomfort, he was a slave anyway, but people find themselves in situations where they will have to lose their job or change their job for the sake of not sinning, to avoid the temptation, the fear that, boy, if I remained close to this situation, I would be tempting myself to sin, and it is not worth it. Risk of bodily harm. I mean, Joseph got thrown in prison. I'm sure his master could have had him killed. Starving 40 days like Jesus in the wilderness. Okay. Could we suffer those things? Jesus didn't do that specifically to avoid temptation. He did that and then was tempted. But if Jesus can do it, it can be done. 2 Corinthians, we just kind of read the concept that Jesus' purpose was to show us how we can live if necessary. So, if we had to go without food for a while because it meant that's how we removed ourselves from a tempting situation, would we be able to do that? What if we had to die? I couldn't escape the temptation because... Okay, give me an example of something that would make us say, sorry God, you didn't provide a way of escape. I would have had to have died to escape, and clearly you don't. Death may be the escape, right? If escape is death, better death than sin. Revelation 2:10, do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful to death, and I will give you the crown of life. And then Daniel 3:17, if this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here. And he will deliver us out of your hand, O king, but if not, be it known to you, O king, we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up. Obviously, idolatry is a sin. And they would not sin, even to the point of death. An encouragement, certainly. Certainly so. If death is the escape, death is the escape. And God promises a way of escape. Another consideration is just the sense of commitment. Job 31:1, I have made a covenant with my eyes, how then could I gaze at a virgin? Okay, the idea here that we have prepared beforehand for the fact that we will face temptation and be prepared to do something about it. Come prepared and committed to avoid temptation no matter what. Sin would destroy his relationship with God, and he knew that, and his relationship was more important. In chapter 2, then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. And one of the things I had on that list that went through was relationships with family, I believe, and this is kind of hard to hear, Job's wife say. More so for him than for me, but that's tough. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God and not also receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Hiding sin would destroy his relationship with his brethren as well. He recognizes this in chapter 31. If I have concealed my transgressions as others do by hiding my iniquity in my heart, because I stood in great fear of the multitude and the contempt of families terrified me, so that I kept silence and did not go out of doors. Oh, that I had one to hear me. Here's my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Oh, that I had the indictment written by my adversary. The purpose behind not sinning, assuming the world is in fairly good shape, and it isn't, is that relationships will hurt if you are sinning, and he's recognizing this, and he's recognizing that he shouldn't be having this happen to him. Job stood against temptation and sin, even with the loss of, here is part of the list again, with application. the support of his wife. His children, he lost them. He lost his friends, if he had them to begin with. He lost his health. He lost his wealth. And to an extent, he ended up losing his confidence in terms of questioning God. But he was so anxious from the beginning to avoid the sin that he tried to make commitments, such as we see in chapter 31. So, I couldn't escape sin because, I couldn't escape temptation because my wife wouldn't help me. My children are dead. These were not reasons that he used because he recognized they were not legitimate at all. Consider temptation. Flee at any cost. Flee like Joseph. Flee like Job. He prepared. He pre-fled. Flee, though it costs things you can't imagine living without. Matthew 5:29. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of the members than your whole body be thrown into hell. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better you lose one of your members than your whole body go into hell. Flee though it costs your desire. Proverbs 7 talks about this all the time. You might want something, but again, crush what you want and get as far away from the temptation as you can. Speaking of the immoral woman, let not your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. And then 1 Timothy talks about money being a temptation, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. I can't remember the verse exactly. I should have had it up here, but to paraphrase, the idea of God giving us just enough, okay, without us being tempted for more, and then not so much that we feel like we have lost sight of Him altogether. Are we allowed to toe the line? Okay, something is a sin. I'll go ahead and allow the temptation to exist nearby. That's what I'm asking here. Well, Galatians 6 says, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. So, the idea here is that we have a person who is in sin. And when you go to try to approach that person, the point that he is making here is that you have got to be careful, because you are stepping near temptation to work with this person, and that is a very, very dangerous situation to be in. You'll have to go there. This is one of those situations where you need to approach that temptation. But can we toe the line just for the fun of it? We have a brother that is lost here. That's not the same as, it's temptation, it's not really a problem for me, I'll keep it in my home, but I won't sin. It's not the same. 1 Corinthians 5:13, God judges those outside. Purge the evil person from among you. Purge. Okay. If that evil person is creating a temptation near you, and that's the assumption of this admonition here, the recognition is get that away. Get it away. Do you fight temptation? In one sense that we use the word, yes, we fight it. However, 1 Corinthians 10:12, therefore, let anyone who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. And the stuff I have read a moment ago doesn't really indicate a fight as much as it does find the escape and take it. Do not introduce yourself to a bunch of temptations so you can sit there and fight against it. As your desire builds, that effort becomes harder, and eventually there will be a point at which you fail. Okay? If there is temptation, flee it. Don't keep it nearby. Flee, flee, flee. Flee. So, reviewing again the application. If tested to death, is what Revelation 2:10 says. If we can be tested to the point of death and still be expected to not sin, then can we give up relationships that tempt us to sin? Can we give up sources of income that tempt us to sin? Can we give up the nice things, extra vehicles? I'm not entirely sure how this would tempt a person to sin. You could think of it this way. I'm so anxious to get the extra vehicle that I'm going to neglect weightier things, put more effort into this, emphasize the physical, forget about my spiritual well-being. Extravagant homes, excess food. Okay? These things can tempt you. If they are tempting you, put them away from you. Don't keep your cupboards full so you can sit there going, well, I'm working on not eating that. Keep it out. Keep it out. My way of not eating a lot of candy is to not keep it in the home. Mom might keep some in the home and she never eats it. Somehow that doesn't tempt her. But for me, if I'm not going to eat it, it has to not be there. This is why we only buy 2 bags of potato chips any one trip, because they're gone. And if we had as much of that in the house as I wanted to eat, okay, you'd be looking at a significantly bigger guy. Rabbits, I put that down because that's me, that's all. Is something about this going to cause me to neglect my family? Which is wrong, neglect my responsibilities in terms of my relationship with the church? I don't know. But if I can't give it up, despite the fact that it seems to be setting something in front of me that is distracting me from the real work, I need to get rid of it because that temptation is not worth it. Better death. So, if better death, then, oh God, I couldn't give up my rabbits. How can I say that to him? There's just no way. Video games, which is a big deal. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not saying that they have to be addicting. I don't know. But I don't play them. So, could these things get in the way of your other responsibilities if they are tempting to distract you or to lead you to sin somehow? Okay, so there's arguments about the violence or language, or I'm not really familiar with them, so I can't exactly say. But if these things can influence your behavior in a negative way, would it be wiser to use them and make sure, fight really hard the fact that it might be influencing your behavior, or do you get rid of it altogether and remove the desire for that thing all the way? Brand clothing, again, the money you spend, it's interesting the way money can pop up there. And consider this, and this is important, I'm not spending much time on it. This is an if-then, if, woe to him through whom temptation comes, Luke 17, then are we exposing others to temptation because of the things to which we cannot let go? Not just your own soul at stake here, right? In other words, if these things could tempt you, and some of these things are sort of important, and some of them aren't, okay? But can we give up the unimportant things if they're tempting other people in our home? And this point I added only recently. Because if I can participate in something in my home that doesn't necessarily tempt me to sin, but it tempts Janice to sin, then woe to me. And the next verse, doesn't it say, better a millstone be hung around his neck and he be cast into the sea? I mean, that's not taking it easy on that person. And so, let us consider, particularly parents, so far as I am concerned, while we are still guiding young ones, children in our home, if there is something that you are anxious to hold on to, but that is causing trouble for your children's souls, get it out! Get it out! And I mean that big time. I really, really do. It is dangerous. It is evil. And I'm talking about internet. I'm talking about the video games. I'm talking about access to pornography is what I'm talking about. Because this is becoming a problem again. Get it out.
Amen.
We are supposed to have zeal in the right way, and if you want to get angry about something, get angry about the sin. And there is nothing wrong with being very upset when you see this stuff start appearing again. Get it out. There is nothing more important than your own soul and your children's soul, and just because you think you're getting away with something, maybe you're not participating in pornography. There's other addictive things online. I mean, internet gambling, there's all this stuff, but the one that's hitting us hard is this one. So, I need to have my phone. I need to have my phone on me and it's got all the internet, it's got all this stuff, because once a month I take a picture of my paycheck and can upload it to my bank immediately rather than wait 3 days. Now, if Elliot is 11 years old and that's why I need the internet and the phone, and it becomes his portal to something sinful, shame on me. Better a millstone hung around my neck. And I yell, but that's that attitude there.
Right.
Get it out. It is interesting to note, and I'm actually almost done here. There's sin and there's righteousness. And there's a point between the two of them, right? One's bad, one's good. They're at opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, that's fairly simple. 2 Timothy 2:22. So flee youthful passions and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. I'm sorry, you can't see it up there, but I highlighted flee and pursue. 2 Timothy 4:7. I fought the good fight. I finished the race. The reason I think, one of the reasons why he refers to this thing as a race is because you're running away from something and towards something. Okay, and thank God that and I mean that in every sense, that the action that takes you closer to Him takes you further away. You're killing two birds with one stone here, as it were. I mean, it's different sides of the same coin. I think that's why that illustration becomes so helpful, because there is sin and you are told to flee, flee, flee. And then at the same time, pursue, pursue. It is a race. You're running. You're running away from something, you're running towards something. And again, we're supposed to be helping our families do that too. That's the end of the slideshow. An additional note. I have said in the past, and some of you have heard me say this, and I want to clarify. I have said that there's physical sin. Okay, you can participate in sexual sin, you can rob, you can steal, you can lie, you can cheat. Those things, I'm not saying you should, but those things are a physical thing that can be accomplished. Something that is more difficult are things like the hate and the envy. Can you really run for those? Well, they're up here. They're up here, and I've said in the past that those sins are harder because you can't escape them, and that's not true. You can't escape them, but it's interesting to think about the fact that when Jesus talks to the apostles about escaping temptation, and they were just falling asleep, okay, something in their heart and mind, the response was to pray. Okay, pray that you may not fall into temptation in that situation. And so I have said you cannot escape it. Technically, in the sense of physically running away from it, you cannot do that. It's with you in your mind. But you can escape in other ways. And those psychological sins, that's my phrase, don't use that all over the place. But those sorts of things are very frightening, because you can't necessarily tell they're going on all the time. The fruits of those things might appear at some point. But those are the things you struggle with. I have a terrible anger problem. That is one of my significant things. And I mentioned to you the situation at work the other day. And I need to go because I don't need to be tempted to do the wrong things there by, it's how I make my living. Can I give up my financial stability for the sake of not being tempted to do something that is sinful when my boss asks me to? I need to be able to give that up and get it out. Okay. But there are other temptations that I could take with me from there, because work has been so frustrating lately. I dreamt about doing physical violence to my boss. That's in my heart right now. And I need to get it out. So, I can face that temptation and fight it the whole time and go home from work and spend time praying, but I am also perhaps not strongly enough trying to flee. I want out. The temptation there is too strong, and the money's not worth it. And we all have examples of that. I'm not trying to hold myself up. Every temptation is common to man. Okay? So what I'm talking about is nothing that nobody else has dealt with before. I need to flee that. So, in my instance, please pray for me as I work on this. I mean, I've almost responded to the invitation in the past couple of weeks as things have been going on there, because that's been a significant burden to me, and I can't tell if it's weakness exactly that keeps me where I'm at or whatever, but that is what it is. And I pray for all of you. Get this stuff out. Flee it. Sin is so horrible. And the temptation is not worth it. There is nothing so important that you cannot get rid of it. To avoid the sin, even including death. And if death is not an escape, but death is an escape. And if death is an escape, anything that gets you away from it is worth grabbing onto, so you can escape that sin. So, I appreciate your time. I am done. We are here to work together. If there are temptations or things you struggle to let go of, things you're either tempted by or things that you're unwilling to give up despite the fact that it has temptation close by, or sin that you're failing to escape somehow, my encouragement would be that we work together to help identify the escape, to pray together, to work through these things so that we can be truly free of sin while we are on this earth in preparation of our eternal home. So if we can help you in any way, yes, you could come forward, but this is also, personal stuff, and we are all supposed to be helping each other in these ways. I would encourage anyone to find a member of the congregation they could speak to about something they cannot get out of their life that they need to get out. and I hope that has been encouraging. The song of invitation was 307. If you'd like to stand as we sing that song.